And welcome into another Vikings post-game edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Bailey Palicki and Jacob Liberta with you here after just another crushing defeat to the Cleveland Browns as the Vikings lose 14-7 today. They fall to 1-3 on the year, and I don't know, man. I think they're in a really bad spot right now. They keep, the sentiment from Zimmer especially is, oh, we're a good team. We just have to figure some stuff out. Well, you're already a quarter of the way through the season. You've lost a couple games you probably shouldn't have. Those are games you can't get back, and the schedule only gets tougher from here on out. So I'd say my patience is wearing extremely thin, especially with Mike Zimmer. And just when you look at the whole totality of this team over the last several seasons, it's the same story over and over again. And honestly, I'm sick of it. Like, I don't know. You were at the game today. What were your impressions being in the stadium and seeing just seeing how crappy of a game that was? Like, what was the crowd like today?
Yeah, it was interesting. Obviously, I think everybody's pretty fired up early on, especially right before the game when the player introductions are going on. Felt like the same old home game that honestly I hadn't been to in 2 years since there was no fans last year. Didn't make it to the home opener against the Seahawks. So it was nice to be back in the building, packed house. Everybody's excited. But the thing that I noticed right away, and you could definitely tell as the game went along, that there were a lot of Browns fans there, and you could definitely tell by the end of the game once everybody kind of ran for the exits. But it was kind of, it was just everybody's obviously fired up after that first drive, scored the opening touchdown. That was huge. Then we had that big red zone stop on 4th down against the Browns. So it felt like this was trending in the right direction, that maybe this would turn into one of those games like we had last week against the Seahawks. But then quickly took a turn for the worse once we went 3-and-out right away on that first drive that we didn't score on, and had those 2 broken screen plays where the pressure's right in Kirk's face instantly. So right from then it was kind of hard to get the crowd into it because it was just kind of sloppy, really ugly, even both ways. I don't think there were a lot of good plays made today. So, I mean, it's reflected in the score 14-7. But I guess especially it got, I want to say this was halftime. I think maybe it wasn't quite halftime. It was one of the first few 3-and-outs right after the half, I should say.
Okay.
It's probably the first one, actually, when the crowd started to just boom. You could hear it everywhere.
Oh, really?
They're fed up with it. I mean, that was the offense after that first drive. I think all the way until the 4th quarter, they had gained like 37 yards since that first drive between the middle of that first quarter through the end of the 3rd. That's just unacceptable.
It is, and that's the problem I've had with these Vikings teams over the last several seasons, really as long as Kirk has been here, honestly, because 2017, whether it was a fluke or not, the offense was able to move the ball constantly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like I don't know if it's Zimmer or if it's Kirk or if it's both of them. It feels like once this team gets punched in the mouth, the offensive line has no ability to fight back whatsoever. Like once they start getting beat on every play. And it's hard to blame Kirk completely because the offensive line was so freaking horrible today. But I kept thinking to myself the entire game, it'd be so nice to have a super fast mobile quarterback that could just get the heck out of there instantly, just bail on the pocket right away, extend the play. And I was even thinking that at the end of the game where you had a shot at a Hail Mary, you probably could have had 2 chances, honestly. I don't know why they threw a dump down with like 8 seconds left, but if you had a quarterback that could run around and buy some time and try and, throw a Hail Mary, that's kind of where those Hail Mary plays work. We saw that last year with Kyler Murray in Arizona when they played against the Bills. If the quarterback can run around for a while, defenders are scrambling. They're, corners aren't supposed to cover for that long. That can change things too. So I don't know. I'm really down on this team at this point. I think, they're 1-3, and I saw Green Bay just beat Pittsburgh. So Green Bay is already 2 games up on us for the division lead. The Bears are ahead of us once again. They're 2-2. I just think it's a big hole to climb out of. It's 2 games, but with how tough our schedule is and the fact that we can't even beat a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, I don't know. I think the writing's starting to get on the wall here for Mike Zimmer.
Yeah, obviously 1-3 is not the start that you want, especially if you want to play the numbers game as far as percentages, favor teams who start the season well to make the playoffs eventually. Like 1-3, certainly not in your favor. And I really think I'm not going to jump off the ship yet. I think there's still a lot of season left, but at the same time, I would also say that as far as the likelihood of Zimmer being fired or not by the end of the season, I think it's more likely right now than it isn't. So I still think there's more games to be played. Let's just see what happens. But at the same time, yeah, it's like we're certainly not going in the right direction, especially coming off a big win last week. I felt like that could have been some positive momentum, but it just died before this right after that first drive, really. And we just couldn't generate anything offensively. And I should have known we were doomed. Once we got done with that first drive, we kept going 3-and-out, especially the first couple times. And Cleveland was just playing this too high look all day. And then
Yep.
you have we still can't run the ball because our offensive lines just get eaten alive. Then I should have known that the game was over at that point, because if you can't run the ball with with the two high safeties, then you're probably not going to get anywhere, because with that, then you're not going to be able to create any explosive plays in the passing game. So you're going to have to dink and dunk your way all the way down the field, and clearly we couldn't do that either today. So
Yeah.
it was going to be a long day from the start. I should have realized it, but this is the result you're going to get when the offense just continually sputters. The offensive line just is terrible, and then you got Kirk Cousins, he folding them like a lawn chair every time a blitz is coming in.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. Like, there were guys in his lap right away today on a lot of plays. But at the same time, it's like at some point as a quarterback, wouldn't you think you just bail out of the pocket a lot quicker than you usually would, because
Mhm.
the pocket's just collapsing like that? So I think some of this is on Kirk. Obviously, it's not all on Kirk. I think a lot of it has to do with this offensive line play today, which is dismal.
Yes.
But at the same time, I really like him to try and create something out of nothing, because that's what quarterbacks that are in his pay range do. So
Exactly.
I'm pretty disappointed he didn't do any of that today. He just folded like a lawn chair, and that was that.
Yeah, it's just the same old story once again. I mean, Kirk had a great first 3 games. Sebastian chimes in here: is Kirktober already over? Kirktober never started apparently after how horrible he was today. So that's Kirk Cousins' career though. He has a good 3 game stretch, and then he comes back with a dud, and then he'll come back when it looks like we're down and out, and he'll come back and win a couple games, and that's how this team gets to 500. Or this year they'll be 8-9 or 7-10, whatever. It's not going to matter. They're not going to make the playoffs, and if they do, they're going to get absolutely destroyed in the first round. You can mark my words, because the Rams are way better than them, the Bucks are way better than them, and I think the Packers are way better than them. I know they got crushed in Week 1. Green Bay is still a really good team. The Vikings cannot hang with these teams, these top teams in the NFC. I'm sorry, they just can't. Especially when the offensive line is going to play like that and just get bullied. I mean, what do you expect? You're playing in the NFL. You're going to play some good defensive players. Why was Rashad Hill one-on-one with Myles Garrett all day today? Makes zero sense to me. Just gets thrown down. There's a play where Conklin's one-on-one with him. That's like when we make fun of teams for putting a tight end on Daniil Hunter. It's the exact same thing. It's horrible coaching. And yeah, Clint Kubiak's a young, inexperienced coordinator. I'm sure there was some mix-ups. And, I'm sure Conklin wasn't supposed to be one-on-one with Garrett, but this once again falls back on Zimmer, because he takes no responsibility in the offensive side of the ball, and he just hands it over to Clint, who is a first-year offensive coordinator. He looks like a middle schooler up in the booth calling plays, and I don't know. It's not fair to some of these offensive guys to, like, I feel like you just read the post-game quotes. Justin Jefferson, oh, I'm not used to losing. I'm used to winning at LSU. It's been tough to start 1-3 the last 2 seasons. It's like, all right, are you going to wear this guy's patience thin already? Like, you cannot afford to piss off your best players like that. And I'm very worried that it's going to come to that. And like with Dalvin Cook, they played him today. He clearly wasn't 100%. He gets his ankle re-aggravated once again. He comes back in at the end of the game when they're trying to lead a game-winning drive. I'd be willing to bet he doesn't play next week. The guy's already like 26 years old. How many more years of him are we going to have left? I don't know. I'm really nervous. Eric Kendricks is still a good player, but I saw him miss a couple tackles today. Harrison Smith's missed a couple tackles this year as well. Like it's I don't want to nitpick our best players, but it's like it's a full team effort here. Like, guys are not playing up to their potential. What happened to our 2 big run stuffing nose tackles that are supposed to stop the run? We gave up 180 yards rushing today. It's just I don't know if it's the scheme. I don't know if it's the players. I don't know if it's the actual coaching. I don't know what the issue is, but it's been the same issue since 2018 with a few different faces here and there, and I'm sick of seeing it. I think it's time to move on from Zim, honestly.
All right. Yeah, I know. After a game like today, I think that does have a lot to do with coaching when we come out and score 7 points, and that's that, especially right after an opening drive. But I also think when we have a defensive-minded head coach that set out this offseason to shore up the run defense, and we just get gashed like we did against the Browns, albeit they have a really good offensive line, and they have probably the best dual running backs in the league. But at the same time, we can't just let them do whatever they want in the run game like they did today.
Yep.
And I will say, like, that's probably my big gripe. But at the same time, at the end of the day, they didn't really give up that many points in the end. Like, they kept them on the end zone all but one time. So, I mean, like, I'm not going to be too upset. I still think this falls mostly on the offense, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, that is on your head coach to make sure everybody's ready to play, not just this one side of the ball. So I
Exactly.
think our offense just did not do nearly enough today. And I mean, you're gonna have your bad days, but it should never look this bad. So I think there's a lot of work to do this week to even get ready for Dan Campbell's Lions. Because obviously, if we lose the Lions, man, then I'm ready to pack it in, just call it a season. But
Yeah.
if we, I still feel okay if we can get to the bye week 3-3. Albeit, I still don't think that's great. I'm afraid of another mediocre ending to the season, but at the same time, I'm gonna hope for now. But come back next week if we lose to the Lions.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and pull up the Vikings schedule here because I want to look and see how difficult it is after the bye. So
Well, we start with Dallas at home.
yes, Dallas at
Well,
home, which I think will be a loss because I don't see how the heck we're gonna be able to defend those guys. Their offense looks really good.
I know that is true, but at the same time, I feel like that could be a game where our offense could counter that and also score a lot of points. But at the same time, I mean, you're not exactly going to beat that drum after a game like today. But then after that, we're going to go on the road to Baltimore, and that's a pretty tough place to win because Baltimore, these last like 3 years, basically ever since Lamar's been the full-time starter, they won a
Yeah.
lot of games in the regular season. So that's pretty tough. And then you're going to go coast to coast and go play at the Chargers right after that, Justin Herbert. And
Yep.
obviously they're a pretty dynamic team themselves. And after that, you come back home, play, was that Green Bay there?
Green Bay, and
Yeah,
then
play Green Bay,
then
go on
you're
the
at
road to
San
San
Fran.
Fran.
That
Yuck.
could literally be 5 losses in a row right there. I mean, knowing the Vikings, they'll win one or two of those games when they really shouldn't. Like the Chargers game, I could see them winning. Maybe the Cowboys, because the Cowboys always have the disaster factor. But that that schedule coming out of the bye is horrific. It's tough. And if you're 3-3 going into the bye, which is the best they can do now, that does nothing for me. Because coming out of the bye, let's say you win 2 of the 5. So that puts you what, 2 more wins, 3 more. So you'd be 5-6. Then you'd have another Lions game, Steelers, Bears, Rams. Like it would set you up for another 500-ish season. And I don't know. I'm at the point like we were talking about this last year, and granted, last year that the first few games of the season looked a lot uglier than this year's did.
Yeah.
But last year we're sitting there. They're 1-5 at the bye, and we're begging them just tank. This is a loaded quarterback class. Just if you have to fire Zimmer, just do it. Wipe the slate clean and prepare for the future. And they didn't do it. They didn't trade Riley Reef when we were begging them to, and that's the crap that happens. They fought back. They won 7 games. They pick in the middle of the first round. They trade back because Trader Rick's always got something up his sleeve. They draft Christian Darrisaw, who was active for the first time today and probably should be starting from here on out, honestly.
He better be. Rashad Hill got absolutely worked today. I realized Myles Garrett is very good, and he's probably a Defensive Player of the Year candidate and consistently now after last season. Then coming in this year, he already has quite a few sacks. So I think he's a very good player, and I think he'd be a lot to contain for anybody. But like you said, I think Darrisaw should get looks because I don't see how you can roll out Hill again after this performance.
It's just not fair to Rashad Hill because he's not a starting NFL offensive lineman. I mean,
No.
I feel bad for him, honestly, but
Yeah.
that's what happens. The team, Darrisaw wasn't really doing anything during OTAs or minicamp, and they still refused to go sign like a veteran left tackle. They were just fine with Rashad Hill. So that's totally on them. Whether it's Spielman, Zimmer, both, I don't know. Sebastian's asking about Dalvin Cook. He's always injury prone. What's the answer for RB1? Now, I will say this. I'm a huge Dalvin Cook fan. I think he's, Justin Jefferson's probably the most skilled player on the offense, but Dalvin Cook is right there with him.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dalvin Cook is one of the best running backs in the league. Now, you can argue that he doesn't deserve to be getting paid what he's getting paid. I think he's making roughly $12.5 million a year, which is quite a bit for a running back these days. But as we've seen, the offense runs through Dalvin Cook. And yeah, Madison had a great week last week. But as we've seen in the past, when Cook's missed games, Madison isn't always going to give you that production. So the offense has been running through Dalvin Cook. That's how they're set up to run. I think they were going to go with that plan again today until the run just wasn't working because the offensive line was horrible. But I think Dalvin Cook's your RB1, at least until he shows that he's washed. I mean, clearly the guy's still got juice. He can still break runs. He's got excellent field vision. I saw a couple plays today where he was able to kind of juke around, find some extra holes. there just really wasn't a lot out there today. Madison didn't look great when he was in either. So I think Dalvin Cook is the answer still. I think he's still a good player. And I would try to get as much as you can out of him before he starts to fall off once he hits, 28, 29 years old, which is only a couple of years away. So I think, enjoy him while you have him because, with having AP and then going straight to Dalvin Cook, basically, I mean, that's a pretty good, 1-2 punch. Granted, it'd be nicer to have like the Favre to Rodgers torch passing at quarterback instead. But I think, yeah, enjoy Dalvin Cook while you can. But I will say, whenever this next regime comes in, whoever it is, they need to lean into offense and they need to lean into finding a modern NFL style quarterback.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm a big Dalvin guy myself too. I think he's dynamite. I think he's one of the best running backs in this league. I still think he's running back one. He's still very good at what he does. Obviously, we might have to revisit this in another couple of years, but at the same time, I still think he's a guy I'd lean on. I'm not even thinking about his contract because I think there's many other things that we could address before that. That's probably
Yes.
as far as on the totem pole of problems go with this team. So I don't really have any issues with Dalvin. Yeah, he gets hurt, but I mean, he plays arguably the most physically demanding position in football. So I'm going to understand when he misses a game here and there and gets
Yes,
banged up
for
because
sure.
that's just the way it is. It's just the nature of the game.
Especially when they run him into the ground.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Madison's a very capable backup. So I'm fine with how things are right now. It's just today I don't know who would run for any success or for much success against this Cleveland front four that our offensive line just could not get any push on. So
Right.
I think Dalvin. I don't think there should be any doubt about Dalvin. I think maybe revaluing the philosophy because
Yes.
we are very run centric offense, and I feel like that doesn't like that can win you games, but at the same time, I don't know if it's going to win you a ton of games, and you probably want to win a ton of games to set yourself up in a playoff picture in playoff seeding, so you can have as many home games as possible, and probably give yourself the best chance to make a run actually and string together some wins,
Yes.
especially when we got Kirk as our QB, and I just don't see him stringing together multiple road wins.
No.
So I think that's also another obstacle I don't know if we'd be able to overcome. So I think, yeah, maybe taking a step back beyond Allen and just about the offensive philosophy would probably be very appropriate. But at the same time, I can see being frustrated when Dalvin does get hurt because, I mean, like we said, he's arguably with Jefferson, he's the most talented offensive player. So when he's missing,
Yeah.
you can definitely tell, and that can be frustrating when you don't have your full complement of weapons on the field.
Absolutely. So we got a couple comments from our buddy Jackson here. He was
Yes.
hustled, scammed, bamboozled, hoodwinked, and led astray by Zim. I'm kind of with you though. Like Zim was trying to sell us a bill of goods on this defense going into this season, and they just have not lived up to that hype whatsoever. I mean, granted, today they only gave up 14 points, but being stuck on the field, giving up 180 rushing yards. I think time of possession, the Browns had like 35 minutes to the Vikings 24 or something.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's a huge difference as well. And you could just kind of tell after that first Vikings drive that when the Browns answered back with their own long drive, that it was just going to be a tough day for the defensive line once again. And then he also has another comment here. I wish I finished assembling my IKEA dresser instead of wasting my Sunday on this team yet again. Never going to IKEA again. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it probably would have been a good idea. Maybe had the game on in the background or something. I don't know. It. I will say it is deflating when you spend 3 hours of every single weekend to watch this team, and it's just the same crap every single time. I mean, it's always disappointing. It's always frustrating. I don't know. I'm getting to the point where it's like I don't even want to watch anymore, but I have to because I'm such a diehard. So it's difficult, but I don't know. That's why I kind of wish if they went into tank mode, we'd actually have something to cheer for because it's like, okay, now we can cheer for draft positioning. And like nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to lose games. But
No.
if you want a good team next year or a couple of years from now, that's what you need to do. You can't be picking middle of the pack all the time.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to be said there about setting yourself up with a good draft pick because that's how teams get these really generational players more times than not. Obviously, you're going to have hits like we got with Jefferson later in the first round, but that's obviously not going to happen all the time. So you're going to set yourself up with more and more favorable odds the higher up in the draft you go. So
Yep.
obviously, we want to avoid that mediocre season as much as possible. Either let's get in the playoffs and make some noise, or let's just be really bad, lose a ton of games, and get a really premier player at the top of the draft. I think that's definitely the line that we're teetering here, and that's kind of concerning. It feels like
Yep.
the season, especially with the way it started, it feels like somewhat similar to last year. And last year, like you said, we ended up in the middle of draft order, which doesn't really do us any good because we didn't make the playoffs. But then we're also not picking in the top 10 and getting a really like I keep saying a premier player. So
Exactly.
that's I don't know which way. It's hard to say when you should just jump off the bandwagon and be like, we need to lose now, so then we
Hmm.
can just give ourselves a good draft pick and maybe take a difference making quarterback that's different than Kirk, unless you think Mon's the guy, which I still believe he could be. But at the same time, if you get a high enough draft pick, it's hard to pass on a quarterback there. Then so that's also something to consider too.
Yeah, for sure. Bud56K chimes in. He says PFF currently has the Vikings allowing 30 total pressures to the Browns on 40 Kirk Cousins dropbacks. And
Oh
I will say,
boy,
I think I saw a stat after the game on Twitter about how a lot of these pressures were with four-man fronts. They weren't even blitzing that often in this game.
yeah,
That's what the frustrating part was. Is like
exactly.
Myles Garrett and Clowney were pinning their ears back and just going straight after our tackles and our guards and just running straight through them. And Kirk didn't have anyone open because they
Yeah.
dropped everyone else back.
Dude, and here's my thing too. Another beef I got with that is it's like that'd be one thing if the numbers were that lopsided and we were playing from like well behind the whole game. But it's
Yes.
like we were within one score the entire time. So it's not like the run game was completely off the table, but for these guys to still dominate the line of scrimmage, it's just unacceptable. Like that can't happen.
Hmm.
I didn't realize it was actually this ridiculous.
I didn't either.
I'm glad Bud brought this up to us. Actually, I realized it was 75% of his dropbacks he's being pressured. That kind of changes my perspective a little bit here. And
Hmm.
I think we just can't have that as an offensive line. I just don't understand week to week how this can happen. Like we come out
Yes.
week 2 against like JJ Watt and Chandler Jones in that front, and we look fine. Like we look like we do the job, and we had that dynamic first half against the Cardinals, and we took them all the way to the wire in a game we should have won. And then you come out last week too. I mean, we managed to keep Kirk clean, and he had a great game. And our offense looked the best set of look, as Zimmer said, in the 8 years he's been there. And then you come
Right.
out this week against again another good defensive line, but it's like now it's like, oh, we're just garbage. We can't stop anybody. And I don't really understand what's changing week to week. Like what gets these guys in the right space to be able to do their job a couple weeks ago against the Cardinals, but then you come out here and just like crap, look like you're just a
Yep.
bunch of backups playing in front of Kirk. So yeah, that's really
But
that grinds.
here's what I will say is Mike Zimmer gave a veteran rest day to a bunch of guys this last Wednesday.
True,
They
true.
win one game and you're already giving them a rest day after 3 weeks. Like I know it's a veteran heavy team, but come on, man. I mean, what kind of message is that sending? So I don't know. I don't really know if that has anything to do with it, but like Rashad Hill was one of those guys that got a veteran rest day. Sure
He was
enough, he gets
terrible.
destroyed today. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that could have something to do with it as well. I don't. I also noticed towards the end of the game, I think it was that last Vikings drive finally, because them and the Browns kind of kept punting back and forth towards the end there. It
Hmm.
was the very last drive. They showed Zimmer on TV. He was like he was clapping, he was trying to get the team all fired up, and it looked like nobody was even paying attention to him. Guys were jogging by him as they were going on the field. It didn't look like anyone else was getting fired up. So I think his message is starting to fall on deaf ears, and I think it's pretty obvious. And yeah, maybe they're able to turn it around by the bye week, get to 3-3. But even that Panthers game, that's going to be no easy task. I mean, the Panthers they had another close game today. I saw Darnold had some good stats again once again today. So I don't know, man. And that's a road game as well. So if you lost to the Bengals on the road, I feel like the Panthers are a pretty comparable opponent there. So I don't know. I'm not feeling good about this, and I just think the vibe at TCO Performance Center, just around the entire team, it's just a bad vibe right now. And we kind of had that, feeling going into the season even.
Yeah, I know. It kind of sucks that I didn't notice that actually when watching the game today. It's probably a little bit different on TV when you see that right in front of you when Zim is trying to hype the team up, and I guess guys aren't reacting to it. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I think there might be some truth to that, especially from offensive players. I think it's possible that they're kind of sick of it that we have this defensive minded head coach that really doesn't really tune into this offensive game plan maybe or offense in general. So I think I could see how players get frustrated with that. But at the same time, I think there's still we got to get the 3-3 by the bye. Yeah, as you mentioned, losing that even against a good Panthers team, I feel like we still have to win that one on the road right before the bye. Because going in 2-4, man, those are some very long odds that I don't know if you. I even being optimistic, I don't think you could overcome, especially like
No,
we mentioned
no
with the
way.
5 games right out of the bye. So I think that these next two games have to be a must if they weren't already. So it all starts next week. I would say got to take it a game at a time and kind of start with the Lions. And who knows? You never in a divisional game, some weird things can happen. So if you don't win that, then I'd be very worried. But I think there's still time to right the ship. But I think our margin for error is quickly diminishing.
Yes, 100%. And you're way more optimistic about it than I am. I'll give you credit for that. I don't know how, after years and years of this, you can still hold out the littlest bit of hope.
Yeah.
Caden chimes in. Good to see Caden chiming in here.
Yes.
Felt like the defense was left on the field the whole game, and he's absolutely right. When you combine the many 3-and-outs this offense had,
Yeah.
inability to convert on third down, and really they were third and long most of the day, either due to penalties or due to a tough running attack today.
Mm-hmm.
You couple that with Cleveland being able to run the ball so well against us, and Baker had to do nothing today, and they won the game. So that's obviously that combination alone is going to put your defense on the field the entire time. So yeah, I don't disagree. Part of it is the defense's fault, but the offense certainly wasn't helping them out either.
For sure, yeah. I'm glad Caden brought this up, actually. I think this is a great point that our defense probably was worn out by the end because how many 3-and-outs, like you just mentioned, that our offense had, that can't happen. Like you can't leave your defense out to dry and playing on the field for what was that 2/3 of the game or whatever the time possession ended up shaking out to be. So
Yeah.
I think that's not a recipe for success, and it's not going to win you a whole lot of football games. So I think our offense, at the very least, if they're not scoring points, they at least got to generate a few first downs just to eat clock and give our defense a little bit of a rest, especially on the front forward, probably just getting pounded by that run game. So I think there's definitely something to be said there about our defense playing too much today. And still, at the end of the day, they gave up way too many rushing yards. At the same time, it was 14 points because Baker honestly missed a lot of throws today too. I think that played into it. But at the same time, our defense did basically what they needed to do to win this game today. And the offense didn't do anything. Basically, the only thing the defense could have done more is maybe spoon-fed the offense a turnover, right, plus territory for us to score and take advantage of. But that just didn't happen today because I guess Baker, even though he missed some throws, he didn't miss in bad spots. So
yeah, that's kind of what I was like begging for this defense to do. Honestly, is like, okay, I know you guys have been on the field for a long time, but can someone make like a huge game-breaking play? And Cam Dantzler, which I'm glad he was playing today because Bashad Breeland's a disaster. Cam Dantzler had a ball go off his helmet when he was chasing down Odell. I think Patrick Peterson in the end zone looked like he could have picked off a ball, but like he didn't turn around quite quick enough, and it just kind of glanced off his hand. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it'd be nice if somebody on this defense, not named like Harrison Smith or Eric Kendricks, could create a turnover. And it just doesn't seem like we've seen that for a couple of years now. And I don't know. Like we've talked about before, it's kind of a product of Zimmer's defense. He doesn't want the corners being uber aggressive, jumping routes, things like that, because if they miss, then they get burned. So, but I feel like at some point, especially if you're 1-3 like we are, you got to start taking more risks. And I was happy to see him go for it a couple times on fourth down today, when he like could have kicked a field goal, or like that's good to see from Zimmer. But also, it's year 8. It would have been nice to see this previously. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of it from like a holistic perspective, because like this game doesn't really matter. They're not going anywhere this year. I can't be convinced otherwise. If they squeak into the playoffs, they're not going to make any noise. And if they don't win the division, they're not going to get in the playoffs. I really don't think, because that NFC West is just wild. Honestly, I saw the Seahawks beat the 49ers today because Jimmy G got hurt. But yeah. So then the Cardinals beat the Rams, which blew my mind. I thought the Rams were the best team in the NFC. So yeah, that NFC West is crazy. I feel like for sure a wild card is going to come out of there. I don't know, probably 2 wild cards coming out of there, honestly.
Here's what I think, though. That's the reason for the hang on to some optimism here. Obviously, when you're a wild card, that's not gonna give you great chances to make a run. And that's really what we want to do. I think we're probably done with just making the playoffs, maybe winning a game, and just
we have to be done. Yeah,
leaving it at that. But I think there is some serious opportunity there to end up as a wild card, because I think Green Bay will probably win this division. I mean, I'll believe when I see it when somebody else does. But at this point, they started the season 3-1 again, even after a disaster opening week against the Saints. But the thing is, when you look at the NFC as a whole, I actually don't mind our chances compared to anybody else's, because I think the NFC West is obviously for sure a 2 playoff team division, at least, if not 3 potentially. Because I think the Rams and Cardinals, I think they're probably going to be the locks.
Yep.
And then I'm not as high on the Niners anymore as I was at the beginning of the year. I think they've just looked bad these last
Mm-hmm.
couple of weeks, and I'm kind of down on them. I think the Seahawks, I mean, we won against them straight up last week.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the NFC South, you got the Panthers, and I'm still trying to determine if they're for real or not. I don't know. It's hard to say. And then you got the Bucks, who will win that division.
Yep.
Falcons are awful. And then
Saints really aren't
the
very
Saints,
good either.
I'm done with the Saints. They screwed me in Survivor Day. I was like, Saints at home, coming back to the Superdome for their first game against the Giants. Great, let's go. This should be a lock. Nope. We're going to blow an 11-point lead with 7 minutes left and lose the game in overtime to Daniel Jones, Joe Judge, and the Giants. That's unacceptable. That's even more unacceptable than the Vikings lost today. So I'm a little salty about that. But I will say, yeah, Saints not going anywhere. They can't beat the Giants at home. They're not doing anything. And then if you go out to the East, I like the Cowboys to win that division. Everybody else, no.
Yeah,
I mean, Washington, we're trading blows with the Falcons of all teams. They're not going anywhere. Their defense has not been the same nearly as it was last year's. And then you got the Giants and Eagles. No thanks. So honestly, our wild card odds don't look that bad. It's just we got to be able to win games that are going to be kind of tough because obviously on the schedule we're going to play a lot of quality opponents, whether they're NFC or AFC, whatever it is. Like we're going to play a lot of good opponents, and that's going to be tough to rack up enough wins. But at the same time, by the end, I feel like we could actually find our way in. And it's just if we're playing our best ball at the end, and basically all the circumstances need to be going right for Kirk to succeed, basically. So it all has to come together. But if it does at the end of the season, then I don't mind our chances to at least win one game, although that's not really what I want at this point. I want to a sustained run to like an NFC championship again. But at the same time, I still feel like we could get in the playoffs. Just let's see how we're playing at the end of the year too.
The worst thing that could happen to this team is to back into the playoffs with 9 wins and then win their first round game and then keep Zimmer and Kirk around for next year. Maybe even throw Kirk a little extension because he drug us to the playoffs.
I feel like there's no way Kirk is back after this year unless we make at least the NFC championship. I'd put that on the record. I don't think there's any way to keep him on a $45 million price tag when max, if we don't get to the NFC championship game, max in 4 seasons, we've won 2 playoff games. And there's no way we pay him the second most money in the league for that next year. I think the Wilf ownership group, along with Spielman, are too smart for that to know that like this just isn't working after 4 years. I feel like this should have been discovered before this, but at the same time, I think now if we have another mediocre season, then that's got to be the writing on the wall. That's got to be when it's blindingly obvious that we can't continue like this.
For sure. So if you look at this, the whole spectrum of this team, what do you think truly is the main problem? I mean, we could say it's the offensive line and how they choose to neglect it year after year, but also they have first-round pick Darisaw, who will be starting here shortly, second-round pick Cleveland, first-round pick Bradbury, Oli Udoh, who was a 6th-round pick but has actually developed really well. They also have Wyatt Davis, who's a 3rd-rounder that could potentially step in as well to play right guard, and then Brian O'Neill, who's a 2nd-rounder. So I'm sick of hearing the excuses that they haven't invested in the offensive line because they have. Now, maybe the coaching hasn't developed them, which I think is probably the main thing, especially with some of these guys. But you can't say they haven't put resources in. And maybe it'd be nice to go sign like a free agent guard, somebody that can, a veteran that can just kind of hold it down. But they've put resources into the offensive line. So I'm sick of hearing that excuse. So between Zimmer, Spielman, and the players, maybe even you could throw the Wilfs into this too if you want.
Sure.
I mean, where do you think the disconnect is? Because I think you and I have been pretty big Spielman guys throughout his tenure. We've enjoyed the drafts that he's had. He's had some really great picks, but as of late, it seems like he hasn't hit as much. Zimmer, it just seems his whole philosophy is wrong for what the current NFL is doing. He wants to run the ball, play defense, low scoring, grind it out victories. And that's just not how anybody plays anymore. Especially when you have an all-time great quarterback sitting there in Green Bay, which maybe his last season, but it may be Zimmer's last season too. So the lack of adapting has been one thing. And then, of course, with the players, you're constantly funneling guys in and out, but your main core guys have been like, Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen. Defensively, you got Kendricks, you got Barr, you got Smith, Daniil Hunter, Everson Griffin is back again. So it's like, where do you think the true disconnect is between all these different tiers on this team?
Yeah, I think everybody probably has a little bit of a little bit. Everybody is a little bit to be to blame for this, honestly, continuing mediocrity here these last few years. But I think ownership, I'm fine with. I feel like they're in it to win it. I feel like there's no qualms about that. I feel like that they're in the right mindset, or I feel like they have the right approach towards how they run this team. I think they will spend any money and do any means necessary to make this a winning organization. And they also don't get too involved in everything that's going on with like roster building and things like that, so that
It's true.
they don't overstep and things get a little messy. And then as far as Rick goes, I'm still on Team Rick, although we have had a lot of misses in the first round in recent years, and really we haven't developed a ton of players in general
Hmm.
in the last probably couple of years. Offensively, I think a little bit more so, and like we discussed last week, defensively, just not at all.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. Yeah, I think it's either at this point, it's either on us evaluating talent in general, or it's on the coaching staff unable to develop them. Because my thing is, I'd probably lean towards just taking more talented players than we are. But at the
Hmm.
same time, like, is it really coaching? Because I watch a game today, like I got home and turned on the Cardinals and Rams game, and literally the commentators are talking about this kind of scenario where it's like the Cardinals are running over this Rams team, and this Rams team has a phenomenal defensive line, and the
Yep.
Cardinals have had all these injuries on the offensive line, but yet they're still making it work. So like, oh, due to this great coaching by this offensive line coach that they have,
Yep.
and they're with these backup level players. So it's like, how come we're not being able to even get close to this where we have like maybe lesser talent, but you just get the most out of them? Like, I feel like we're not getting that right now. It's either
No.
we draft talented players or they're just a bust. And like, they're just going to be basically a very obvious point to why we lose games sometimes. So I think my thing is probably leaning more towards the coaching right now
Hmm.
than just drafting players and the front office assembling a roster. So probably lean towards coaching, but obviously I think a little bit has to do with evaluating talent too. Like, it does definitely make it easier on the coaches if you take the right players to begin with. But at the same time, I feel like we should be able to make more out of what we have than we are.
Is there is there a guy that we have drafted that is like solid but not great? I can't even
So
think of one. Like maybe Ezra Cleveland, but it's like his second year,
it's
so the jury's still out.
yeah, exactly. I
But
would
like think
say,
about it. Like Jefferson, he's a star. Kendricks is a
oh yeah,
star. Harrison Smith is a star. Danielle Hunter's a star. But DJ Wanham, where is he? He's not even solid.
no,
Um, Troy Dye, Chaz Surratt, nowhere to be found. Not even solid. Cam Dantzler, he's finally getting back in. I'd say I wouldn't say
he's probably kind of close to it.
he's close, but like we
Yeah,
need to see more from him because for some reason he's been in the doghouse, so he needs to play a little more.
true.
Safeties, Xavier Woods we signed, Nick Vigil we signed, both our defensive tackles we signed. I can't think of like we don't yeah like you said we just and that's where the depth issue lacks as well. There's no guys that we drafted that are decent players, but they're not going to be superstars.
Yep.
There's none of those guys. It's either they're an absolute star or they're a complete bust, and there's no in between. You absolutely hit it on the head.
Yeah, it's boom or bust. These guys are great, or they're not going to do anything for us, and they're going to be a liability to our team. So I, I don't know why we can't find any middle ground players, because that's what good teams have. Like, for instance, Cleveland, their defense I think was pretty solid today. Although I think
Mm-hmm.
it had more to do with our offense just playing bad than them. But obviously, they started up front with Garrett, number one pick. That I
Yep.
hope you get that right. And then Clowney signed in the offseason, the former number one overall pick. But then you go beyond that into like their secondary, and you got guys like, for instance, a Troy Hill that they acquired in
Yeah.
free agency. Like,
Yep.
who is this guy? And he's still playing pretty good out there. And then you
Mm-hmm.
got guys like they have John Johnson, I think the safety too, right?
Yep.
And he's a good player. And it's like he's a solid player. He's not like, wow, everybody in the league's talking about John Johnson or something. But
Yep.
they find these good teams, find guys that are not going to be liabilities, and they're just going to be solid players where you don't even notice them. Like you said, when you think about the Vikings roster in its totality, like, who's solid but not like who's basically falls in that middle ground there. Maybe I would say depends how you feel about O'Neal. I guess I think
Mm-hmm.
O'Neal is pretty solid, but I guess it depends where you rank him among the rest of the league. Like, I think
Yeah.
he's, in my opinion, he's probably a pretty great right tackle compared to the rest of the league. But at the same time, maybe you don't quite feel that way. I don't know, but maybe that's a player to entertain too, as far as falling in that category. And maybe
Right.
KJ Osborne turns into that too. I don't know, but a lot of these players, the jury is still out, and maybe Madison is like that too. I don't know, but he's not even
Mm-hmm.
one of our starters either. So
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. And going back to my original question, like the Wolves, like you said, they're willing to spend the money, they're willing to do whatever it takes.
Yep.
But I also think they're too willing to enable mediocrity,
True.
at least for too long. I mean, after 2017, the expectation should have been Super Bowl or bust. And for that 2018 team with Kirk Cousins
Oh, eight,
and
seven, and one.
and a loaded defense still, I can't remember. Dalvin Cook was back that year, but he was
Yep.
partially injured that season.
I think he played 11 games. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but for that team to not even make the playoffs and to lose at home in Week 17 to a division rival Chicago Bears,
Yep.
that's unacceptable. That should have been the last straw right there. Honestly, they come back for 2019. They have a weak schedule. They squeak into the playoffs as a wild card. They somehow upset the Saints, but then they come back to reality and get trounced by the San Francisco 49ers. And then they haven't been back to the playoffs since. It's not looking like they're going to get back this year. So
yeah,
I think Spielman's their guy. I think they really like Rick Spielman, and I think he's probably going to be around for a few more years, I would guess.
Yeah, and I'm probably okay with that for the most part. Like, I could probably nitpick his roster building, but at the same time, I come in almost every season and I feel at least okay about our roster. Like, It doesn't feel like that's where the deficiencies lie. Is like right from the onset, like, oh man, we're not going to have a good team this year. Like, just on paper, it looks great, but it's like it just has to come to reality more from our coaching and just bringing the best out of guys and basically putting guys in the best situation possible to succeed. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why our team in 2017 was so good, going back that far, because guys like, for instance, offensively, we had Shermer, who really adapted towards what our quarterbacks did, like with the midseason change with Keenum, basically doing what he does best and calling plays dictated around that and what our players are going to be able to do best, really, because if you don't, then you're just stuck in your own ways. Then you're probably not going to get the best results.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think that I don't know. I'm just so fed up, man. I'm so fed up. But yeah, I think Spielman's going to be around, like you said. You know, we go into every season, we think the roster looks pretty good. We're pretty satisfied with every draft he has. Seems like free agency, he goes out and signs at least one solid guy every year. But I think I just part of me kind of wonders too if the drafting would improve if there's a different coach in there with a different philosophy. You know, if you try to lean into the offense more, maybe you can draft better offensive linemen. I don't know. Maybe, you know, you can find more defensive gems if you're not like forcing to take one in the first round every year. They didn't this last season, obviously, but it always seems like Zimmer's pushing for a guy, you know, early. And it's like, oh, I love his prototype, and, you know, Andre Patterson will develop him. And just because Andre Patterson did it with Danielle Hunter and Everson Griffin doesn't mean he's going to do it with everybody. I mean, Armand Watts is in his third year. DJ Wanham's in his second year. I mean, what are these guys really doing for this team? So, I mean, I don't know. I think it's time for a new, you know, a fresh start. And like I've said before, it doesn't have to be like a complete rebuild. Like if you're dumping your coach and your quarterback, like, yeah, those are two extremely big positions to be changing. But really, as long as you can find the right quarterback and you can get a competent coach in here that's willing to, you know, oversee the entire operation, I think you can get right back into it without missing much of a beat at all.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. I feel like there's still a lot of good pieces in place, and hopefully, if this were to happen, still 4 weeks in the season, I'm on the Zim train, but check back with me in a few weeks. I think once we get to the bye, we'll reevaluate things. But at the same time, if this were to happen, hypothetically, I think getting a coach that maybe leans into the offense more, like you said, and just find a quarterback that can run it, whatever they want to do, and hopefully it's a more progressive thinking kind of coach, and then hopefully play to the strong suits of, like, let's say a Kellen Mond or whoever this new coach would bring in. And then for the new coach, maybe to have a better impact on the draft. And like you said, maybe forcing defensive picks when that really the value isn't there. But at the same time, I guess, what was your original question though? I'm losing sight of it. I was starting to go off into these other tangents, but
yeah. So I was basically just wondering where you think the disconnect is between ownership, GM, coach, and players.
Yeah, I guess it's got to be between the GM and coach. Maybe I feel
that's
like
kind of what I'm thinking too. Because even like before the season, you know, during the preseason, Zimmer was talking about lack of depth. Like he kept bringing up how, you know, our roster is great, you know, the first 22 guys, but then after that, it's not so great. It's like he's trying to throw these subtle shots at Spielman, but it's like, you can't tell me that half these guys on the defense that aren't starters
Yeah,
Well, it's not either they can't play or like you can't tell me you weren't in that draft room, pounding on the table to pick these guys. I mean,
that's
come
true.
on.
Yeah, that's true. Got to take some responsibility there. Got to have some accountability. I think, yeah, just get the most out of these guys. They shouldn't all just look terrible when they come in and play and just do
No.
literally nothing for us, because every team's got to have those role players. And that's for us, it would be the likes of, like we mentioned, it would be Wanham or something, or it'd be
Hmm.
Troy Dye or Chaz Surratt or whoever it might be on defense. And just none of them are really doing anything for this defense. It's all
Yep.
these free agent signings and all these guys that have been here forever. So I think that's where one of our biggest problems lies.
Yeah, and like you kind of look around the NFL. I've been watching some other games the last couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Pittsburgh Steelers, they always seem to have like a sixth round pick that starts on their offensive line as a
True.
rookie. The Chiefs
Yeah.
are starting a couple rookies on their offensive
Three
line.
of them. Yeah.
And granted their offensive line isn't great, but like they're good enough to start. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like Vikings, nope, if you're not a first round pick, you're not ready to play yet. It's like,
Yeah.
well, what's the point then? I mean, you could have a great draft where you could draft multiple starting players and that could
Mm-hmm.
change the course of your team for the next several years.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's kind of part of Zimmer's mentality too. I think there's something there where he's got that got earn it rook, but I just think
Drives
that's
me
probably
nuts.
that's probably an old adage that probably shouldn't be adhered to anymore. And I think obviously there's right place, right time for these rookies. Sometimes you definitely should not force rookies into situations that they're not ready for. But at the same time, like, are we just continuously taking rookies that aren't ready to play right away? I mean, what's the deal? I think that, like you said, that could be a huge benefit to your team if you have rookies that can play and start right away, because they're on very team friendly contracts. So then you can load up the rest of the roster around them, whether that be a rookie quarterback or whoever that you're plugging in to play. And I think that'd be a huge advantage that we're just not really getting, because we don't really play that many rookies. And the only time I can remember us doing this, I guess, is last year in our secondary, but then that
Yep.
that didn't look so great by the end. But at the same time, I think that had more to do with the four up front than anything, in
Right.
my opinion. But I think others might feel differently.
Yeah, and like that's where I keep going back to the Dancer thing because it just blows my mind. I mean, he was a third round pick who started a lot of games for you last year. He had a couple interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
He was the best corner on the team last year, and he's not good enough to play this year because he had a rough or training camp. Like,
Mm-hmm.
give me a break. What could they have possibly seen that shows Bashad Breeland is a better corner than Cam Dantzler? Do they just give him the benefit of the doubt because he's a veteran and Dantzler's a second year guy? And Dantzler's not a good special teamer, so he can't be active on game day. Like, give me a break. That's not how you manage a football team. You put your best 22 starters on the field every week so you can win games.
Yeah,
Like
that's
if Cam Dantzler was playing week one, would we have beaten the Bengals? I mean, think about Jamar Chase burning Breeland a couple times.
especially right before that first half,
I
or
mean,
right before the end of that first half.
think about it. To me, it's coaching malpractice, honestly. And Zimmer's game management still isn't great. You didn't really factor in today because we didn't really, have a shot to do much. I mean, that last game-winning drive, we were able to move the ball, and then the check down to Conklin, and then the half whatever you want to call it, like
Hail Mary, whatever.
yeah, it barely
Yeah.
got to the end zone. Like I don't know, it was garbage, but
Yeah, I just thought of this actually. What do you think about the trend of the 3 games that we've lost this year? The other team has had, like, honestly, a score that definitely should not have happened or should have been allowed. Because if you go back to week one, like you just mentioned, with that Bashad Breeland allowed touchdown to Jamar Chase with like 30 seconds left, he just gets beat deep for like a 50-yard
yep,
touchdown. Then you go into Arizona, we had complete blunder of a 16-second drive by the Cardinals getting the field goal range for
yep,
Prater to hit a 61-yarder. And then you go into today, just a disaster. 3rd and 20, they run
yeah,
a give-up play. They hand it to Kareem Hunt, and he gets a first down. And then they end up getting a field goal at the end of the drive. That kind of changes the way you look at or how you approach the game in the second half, and as far as like what you're really going for. And
right,
because, how do I say this? If it's not, if they don't end up with those extra 3 points, then it's only an 8-7 game. And
hmm
then also that's another thing too, is that stupid right at the end of the half too, where they apparently don't know how to play the field goal block team,
yep.
and then we
Had
get
12 men on the field, and then you call a timeout when you don't have one. I mean, that is a
that's
thousand percent on Mike Zimmer.
yeah, it is on Mike Zimmer. At the same time, like, I think there might be a little bit of hate on how Zimmer used the timeouts. On my end, I kind of thought he used them correctly, but at the same
I did
time,
too.
at the same time, I feel like because he was saving time for the offense. I thought that was great. That seemed like a
Mm-hmm.
very Mike Zimmer thing like to do. But at the
Right.
same time, I think the coaches just got to make everybody aware of what's going on, and like we got to be able to get our field goal block team on the field correctly, so we don't incur that half the distance goal penalty, which results in Cleveland get 2 points instead of one. So I don't know. Yeah, that definitely has to do with coaching too. But
It does, because this is like I've said before, this is a veteran team.
yeah,
You don't have any rookies starting for you right now. None.
that's true. That's
All
true.
these
Yeah,
guys have played in the NFL before. So what is the problem?
this shouldn't happen, especially at home. Come on.
Yeah, why are we melting down in week one and having so many penalties, especially on the offensive line?
Sure.
Week two, we can't literally cannot play defense, making mental errors all over the place. And here's also what I've noticed. I noticed it again today.
Mm-hmm.
The defense, like especially the linebackers, it seems, are always like pointing to each other, like, no, you need to line up here. No, you need to line up here. It's like it seems like the defense is still not on the same page. And that's concerning 4 games into the season, especially with a bunch of veterans.
I would like to think that would get better. Hopefully, if Barr gets back in the mix, just because
Which
I think
when will that be? Good
I,
grief.
I know I hope sooner rather than later. Because I mean, he is usually the Mike linebacker, and I'm not sure if this has anything to do with anything, but I mean, he is the guy. Like when he's playing, he's the one with the green dot who ends up calling in the plays to the defense from Zim. So I
Right.
mean, maybe that would help our communication, like you pointed out there. But at the same time, I don't really know if that's gonna help our defense as much as I think it might. But at the same time, who knows? Maybe they'd give you the extra boost that you need. Just the
Mm-hmm.
split second timing as far as getting lined up and everything could make all the difference. But at the same time, maybe it wouldn't at all. I don't know.
I do think the defense would be better with Barr in there just because Vigil doesn't play the run very well. But
Sure. Well, plus it's also a chain effect. That's like if
yeah,
Vigil or if Barr is starting, then Vigil is your supporting linebacker instead of these
yes.
other guys are bringing in like Blake Lynch or whatever. I mean, like, no disrespect to him, but I mean, clearly we have 3 guys on this roster. Everybody's healthy that are better than him. So like,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, it's just a ripple effect that if Barr is playing, then Vigil is your supporting linebacker. Then that also makes things better in turn as well.
Yeah. So let's try to end, I guess, with a little bit of a positive
Yeah,
note.
let's put a silver lining on this. Albeit I'm sick of moral victories, but at the same time, yeah, I like let's talk about something positive.
I'm not gonna get into like the whole team moral victory thing. I just want to
Sure.
know who were the best 3 players you saw today,
Best 3 players. I'd say Justin Jefferson has to be one.
for sure.
He had a lot of good plays today, among the very few that our offense did. I would also say that defensively, I mean, I'd say the front four, as far as like getting after Baker, I thought they did a pretty good job. Like
They did.
our pass defense in general didn't really get burned, albeit I feel like they could have if Baker just hits a couple more throws. But at the same time, I mean, they did their job in pass defense, and I felt like that was severely lacking at points these last couple of weeks against Seattle and Arizona, especially. So I I got to say just the D line and pass rushing situations,
Mm-hmm.
and then I guess specifically maybe like Daniil Hunter, probably. I mean, I thought he played pretty well. And then
Yeah.
outside of that, I mean, it's hard to even think of 3 guys that I would say
Right.
played well. I
That's
guess
the thing.
maybe Dantzler, actually. I felt like
Okay.
he played pretty solid for the most part, I thought, today. Maybe it looked
Mm-hmm.
different when you watch on TV or something, but and maybe I missed something. But I think that's definitely another thing, too, is you see the game so much differently, too, when you're at the game or when watching on TV or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Dantzler did play well today.
Yeah.
Jefferson has to make the list. I mean, he was the best player for us today, without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I thought KJ Osborne once again looked really good. He made a couple of really nice catches.
Good point. That was amazing. That toe tap on the sideline, falling on who's back to make that honestly really tough catch.
The dude's legit. Like I think he could actually be like a second receiver if he needed to be. So that's very encouraging. I don't know how the PFF grades will pan out, but I thought Patrick Peterson had a good game again today.
Good point.
OBJ didn't really explode. The one like big catch he had was like in a zone defense where he kind of just found a spot in the middle.
Yeah. Plus, that was a play action and a very, I would say, when we're playing for the run because that's when they're burning clock in the fourth quarter. So I think that's a different thing too. But
yeah, so I didn't really notice Patrick Peterson getting burned or anything. I think he's honestly been pretty solid to start off the season. So he's not going to be that. Go ahead.
Yeah, he hasn't had any plays where it's been like glaring issues or anything. So that's
exactly. He's not going to be that lockdown corner like he was a few years ago, which is fine. Hopefully and hopefully Dantzler can kind of become that guy. I mean, he's very skinny. I remember Trey Waynes was a skinny guy. I think he was skinnier than Dantzler is, but
Mm-hmm.
hopefully Dantzler can beef up a little bit and he can start to hang with some of these bigger receivers because I don't need, like you said, he doesn't need to be the shutdown guy, but if he could be a reliable like cornerback one, that'd be huge. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of agree with your three best players. Are there any main players specifically you're concerned about as we keep heading into the season here?
I would say probably Garrett Bradbury, really.
Yeah.
I feel like anytime we're going to run into a really good defensive line, really physical one that's going to get after Kirk pretty good, man, that guy is not getting it done, and I'm getting really frustrated with that. Especially a game like today, or like you saw in Week 1 against Cincinnati. That's just the same old crap, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of sick of it. And I think that's who I'm really concerned about because we don't really have an obvious replacement either, waiting in the wings to take a
Right.
spot. So I mean, we might just continually see this when we play good defensive lines. So that's pretty concerning.
Yeah, I would agree with you. He was good last week, and he had another rough week again this week, and
Mm-hmm.
it always seems to happen. And watch when we play the Bears this year. I guarantee it'll happen again, and the
Yep.
Packers. And
Yep.
so yeah, I'd agree with you there. Mine would probably be Dalvin Tomlinson. I know he had a
Okay.
good game last week. He was highly graded, but once again, we could have signed Riley Reef back instead of bringing in Dalvin Tomlinson. And what's our return on investment on this guy? What are we getting from him? I mean, Cleveland Browns running for 180 yards today. Now, granted, Michael Pierce went out with an injury, and then so he was out for like half the game. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on, man, what are we doing here with Dalvin Tomlinson? I mean, why do we have two nose tackles? I don't understand that part of it.
Dude, Zim better be right that there's nothing to worry about with this run defense and that things will be fine in these next couple of weeks. Because if he's not, this is going to be a long year for that run defense.
I think Zim's just trying to save his job on it. Like he's doing everything he can to try to save his job. Like, oh, maybe the Wolves will think if I just come out and say, don't worry, like the team's good. I don't know. We've watched them for 4 weeks now. They've lost three of their games, mostly by shooting themselves in the foot. Like the team is talented, but is it coached well? Not at all. Not at all in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. And I think coaching can make all the difference sometimes in these close losses, like we had of Cincinnati losing by 3 in overtime, Arizona losing by 1 right off that missed kick. And then you got today losing by a touchdown. We were in it the whole time. It's just we couldn't do anything offensively. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes coaching is going to give you that extra boost that you need to win those close games instead of lose them.
Yeah, I long for the day where we can have faith in this team to make a game-winning comeback drive, um, where we can. That's the thing. Like from the third drive on, I could just tell that we're screwed. Like this team isn't going to be able to move the ball against this defense because Kirk looks scared. The offensive line looks completely overwhelmed, and
Yep.
that was that. I mean, that was the story of the game, and
Because you feel like you've seen this movie before.
it's because we have many times, and it needs to end. Like even if it is like a rebuild and it takes a few years, it's like we just need something different here because what we have now is not working. And there's a majority of the fan base that doesn't want to blame anything on Kirk. There's a majority that wants to blame everything on him, and I think we fall somewhere in the middle. You know,
I
the
probably lean
quarter.
more towards blaming more towards Kirk, but
I do too, but the quarterback's the most important position on the team, and he's got to take a lot of the responsibility.
he does,
Um,
especially when he's getting paid like one of the 5 best in the league.
exactly. To have a performance like that today is unacceptable, even with how bad the offensive line was. So yeah, they got some things to work out for sure. It'll be interesting to see how they come out next week. I mean, it's the Lions; they should win that game at
You
home.
better.
But yeah, I don't know. Even if it's an ugly win, I'm going to be extremely upset. I mean, I don't know. I want to get to the point where it's like I don't really care what the result is. I just want to watch the Vikings for entertainment, and that could be coming here because that started last year too, and then they kind of roped me back into it by winning, 4 games in a row or whatever the heck it was to get back into the playoff contention there. So
That's just nasty, isn't it?
it is. But do you have any final thoughts, I guess, before we take off here?
Yeah, just another tough loss to swallow in this beginning to the 2021 season. But I think brighter days are ahead. Starting next week against the Lions, I'm still optimistic that we can turn this thing around. But at the same time, I think there's definitely some cause for concern here. 1 and 3 starts are not usually made by good teams, so that's. I'm hoping that we kind of defy the trends there, but at the same time, we got some work to do.
Yeah, I think Zimmer is slowly losing this team if he hasn't already. And I just don't think him and Cousins are a good match. Whether whoever's fault it
No,
is, I don't
that's
know.
true. Yeah.
It could be Spielman's fault, honestly. But
Maybe Spiel was trying to force something that should have never happened in the first place.
exactly, I don't think those two are good for each other. Zimmer's like a gritty, grind it out kind of guy. Kirk's not that guy at all. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it's a disaster that's slowly unfolding before our eyes. I think you and I are on different spectrums of this. No, I fully anticipate them to be 3-3 going into the bye,
Okay.
but I don't know. Like honestly, worst case scenario is winning 7 or 8 games. So like if they win 4 or 5, I'll be happier than
That's
if they win 7 or 8.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, I also want to make that clear that if we're gonna win, I want to win at least 10 games. But if we're not gonna do that, then yeah, I'd rather we win 4 or 5 or something. Let's get a really good draft pick.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll discuss more Viking stuff this week as well. We are the North Star Takes podcast. If you're tuning in for the first time, be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give us a like on this video as well.
Mm-hmm.
It'll help us reach out to more Vikings fans, more upset Vikings fans after today's horrible loss.
Yes.
And give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram as well. And yeah, feel free to keep adding your comments to this video as well. Once we're done going live here, we're pretty good about responding to comments as well. So yeah, leave us all your thoughts, and thanks for watching.